Well, the vote, of course, all that angst coming from the British exit vote from the EU tomorrow. I want to discuss it with Art Laffer. Art, Art, we keep hearing that the vote itself, I think initially it was about sovereignty, I think to a degree about the idea of unelected bureaucrats from Brussels telling the British people what to do. It's morphed into something larger, including immigration, controlling borders. But there's an underlying economic aspect to this that, for me, it's hard to get a handle on, because since the EU founding, it became official in '93, GDP per capita has done extraordinarily better for England than it did for Germany, even in America. So where is this economically? Because markets are so afraid of this thing. Why?
Well, first place, the UK, while it is a member of the EU, it does not use the euro. The British use the pound still, which does separate it from the rest of the common market. Also, there are certain other regulations and restrictions and things that do not apply to the UK that do apply to Europe. However, from my standpoint, I think England has been held back by the EU, and I think EU has probably been held back by having England in it. There are a lot of countervailing obligations in both countries and incentives in both countries that really don't mesh very well. And I would say the same thing is also true for Ireland. My joke was that Ireland should punt the euro because they really are in a separate economic category than is the common market. But the voters will have their choice, and people deserve the governments they get, Charles.
Yeah. A reminder to American voters as well.
Yes,
Liz
sir.
Peek, you wrote a great piece on this yesterday. It was John Majors, I think, who actually insisted on an opt-out clause for the euro, which in hindsight was a brilliant stroke of genius. Now should the entire country just opt out?
Well, I think the English are confronting exactly what Art talked about, this lack of sovereignty. They're tired of the faceless bureaucrats in Brussels having a say over everything in their lives, including now whether or not they can use the age-old standard appliance of every English household, which is an electric tea kettle, which the EU says is energy inefficient. They got to get rid of it. It's that kind of micromanaging of English lives that are driving the people crazy. What's interesting is, despite all the establishment scaremongering, every business leader at the military actually chiming in, even President Obama making his views known, English people are still thinking they might want to leave the EU. And I think it's an amazing anti-establishment surge, kind of like what we're seeing in the United States.
Right, there's no doubt about it. I saw a YouGov poll, Art, that showed overwhelmingly the British voters, the British people said that the EU, the relationship served big banks, big corporations, and the wealthy while hurting small businesses, low-income earners, and pensioners. It sounds very much like the schism that we have in this country, the bifurcation of two economies. If you're wealthy in America, you're doing extraordinarily well. The rest, just not.
Yeah, well, if you look at Europe or the U.S., I mean, the wealthy don't have the investment opportunities they'd like to have if we had lower tax rates, sounder money, and freer trade and less regulations. And so, therefore, they're not investing. And what's happening, of course, is the lower groups are suffering enormously all over the world because of high taxes, because of causing the wealthy not to focus on producing output, employment, and production, but instead on trying to shelter income and trying to get their gains through alternative means of tax avoidance. But it's sad when people focus on taxes, not on producing goods. At a 50% tax rate, Charles, a person should spend 50% of his time and resources on trying to reduce taxes. That's not what people should be doing.
Absolutely. All right, Art, listen, I need you to stay right there. Varney and company, we have special coverage of this British exit vote tomorrow at 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Now to politics. Hillary Clinton took direct aim at Donald Trump, attacking his business records. She says he'll bankrupt the country, just like he's bankrupt some of his companies. Art Laffer, I'm pretty sure you disagree with that.
I do disagree with that. I disagree with the assessment of his own business record. I mean, you ought to talk to Jack Welch and other partners that he's had. They all say very nice things about him. They say he was a good partner. He did his job correctly. They made money with him. So, I'm sure there are others who disagree with that. But bottom line, he's done probably a pretty good job. And his tax plan, his economic plan, is so far very, very good. I mean, when you have a 15% corporate tax, max tax, that'll bring jobs and businesses back into the U.S. like mad. Hillary's the exact opposite. She wants to raise taxes on the rich and on the corporations. The other thing is he's going to have a maximum tax on individuals of 25%. which would be spectacular. People would stop focusing on their taxes and trying to how to get around them, and would start focusing on growth economy.
Can I just jump in here? Sorry, it's Liz McDonald.
Sorry, Liz.
Good to
How
see
are you?
Art. You know, sometimes there's been criticism of Hillary Clinton's economic policies feeling like an episode of the TV show Seinfeld where nothing goes on. What is the economic growth policy? But here's the other thing, Art. Isn't it true, check me if I'm wrong, that when tax rates were cut for high-income individuals under Calvin Coolidge or JFK or George W., that high-income individuals actually paid more into the system than prior?
And that's exactly true. In a piece I did for the Wall Street Journal quite a while ago, whenever they cut tax rates, revenues from the top 1% of income earners as a share of GDP went up. In the Calvin Coolidge period, Liz, to your point, they cut the highest rate, the rate the rich pay, from 77% in 1919 to 25% in 1925. Now that's cutting it to a third, less than a third of what it had been, and yet still revenues from the top 1% went through the ceiling. So and then we had a boom in the economy. It happens every time, and Hillary doesn't get it.
It happened too under that guy named Ronald Reagan too. You might know of him.
It happened under
UK.
that guy too.
All right. Hey guys, by the way, one more for you, Art, by the way. Donald Trump on Lou Dobbs last night, he was talking taxes, and I want you guys to take a listen. Roll tape.
Hillary has to raise taxes to 55 or 60%. There's no way she can do anything less than that. So we're going to give a massive tax decrease for people and for business. So I'm actually being good to business.
You know, Art, the great welfare utopia that that Barack Obama has been building is very expensive. Donald Trump pointed that out. But Hillary also, to a degree, admitting this yesterday, saying she's going to pay for it by taxing the super rich and Wall Street so that they can pay for these quote-unquote investments.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, she is going to do that, and she will be the third term of Barack Obama if she were elected, which I don't think she will be. I think Donald Trump will be elected, and I think the pro-growth agenda will come into place, and I think you're going to see a prosperity in America we haven't seen for a long, long time.
You know, Art Laffer is still here, guys. Art, Gene Sperling, who's Hillary's economic advisor and, of course, the former economic advisor to Presidents Clinton and Obama, says that we need to tax the 1%. I want you to take a listen to this.
Until President Obama was able to bring back the top tax rate, we actually saw that many people in the 400 most well-off Americans making $336 million, many of them were paying under 20%. So, yes, we can ask people at the top 1% who have done better.
You know, Art, listen, it's this whole 1% thing, we heard, you know, over and over again with President Obama, he was able to raise hike taxes. We see the end result is the most anemic economic recovery, post-recession economic recovery in history. So, but I guess in the politics of envy, the bottom line doesn't really matter. And all of these things really, to me, are more about politics of envy and anti-capitalism than a real economic plan.
Yeah, I know Gene Sperling, and he's a good guy, by the way. He is, but he's paid by Hillary to say those lines. And frankly, no economist who looks at those numbers would really believe that you can collect more revenues by raising the rate on those people in the top bracket. Now, what you really want to do is have a low-rate, broad-based flat tax where everyone pays their fair share across the board and they feel the tax rates are justified. And then you'll get compliance pouring in and you'll get revenues from the top 1% roaring in. But, you know, people like Obama, people like Buffett and these guys don't pay their fair share at all. They dodge taxes all the way.
And they won't pay their fair share.
No, they don't pay them. They don't pay the top rate.
Listen, when the rates were cut, the tax rates were cut between 2001 and 2008, that 400, top 400, whatever, they paid almost 2/3 more into the tax system when the rates were cut.
That's called supply side. Again, I think Art might have heard of it. All right, guys. Hey, want to bring in Liz Peek, Liz McDonald, Scott Shellady, Shaw Galani. Art Laffer's been so kind to stick around with this. But, Scott, I'll go to you first. The market, what are you looking for on Friday with the conclusion of the British show? Give us both outcomes. Stay, leave.
Well, I mean, no, the honest answer is if they leave, nobody really knows what's going to happen. And I think we've seen some big investment banks come across our desk and say the truth. And the truth is nobody knows what's going to happen. We know what will happen if they stay. It'll be more of the same. But if I can rewrite history for you, Charles, can you imagine in 1775 a bunch of new colonial settlers sitting down and saying, you know what, the king isn't that bad. Why don't we just end up trying to find a way to pay the tax, and we'll just stick around?
Well,
I don't think that's
guy
what
who
they're
said
going to
his
do.
name was Benedict. There was one guy in the group. The guy named Benedict. Everyone said, "Arnold, go outside and smoke your pipe." All right, but I get your point there. Art Laffer, you've been bearish for a while. For the most part, the Brexit. What kind of role is it playing for the markets, near term, long term?
You know, I think Britain will probably stay in the common market. That's my guess of the polls, and I have no expertise there. But if they do get out, I think the long-term prospects for the UK will be a lot better, although you might get some short-term disruption. But I think a vote to get out of the common market, Brexit being successful, would be very positive for Britain over the long term.
Long term, but short term, I think we all agree it'd be crazy gyrations in the market as we try to figure it all out. All right, guys. I've seen the schematics of the next one. The 8 looks really interesting, but on this, you know, Art, maybe they're addressing the issue that you told me you were upset about, and that's they haven't done much with the Beats acquisition. So, Art, I know this is something that's really got you upset. Maybe this is it.
It's way there. What can I tell you? I don't even have a computer, Charles, so I'm really not into iPhones or any of that stuff. But it's really fascinating watching you guys discuss it because you sound like geniuses. And gosh, I love these companies. I own a little Tesla. I got a little worried about you there, Shaw. So saying you've been shorting it. So what can I say? But it's great seeing what's going on in these markets. And 2 years from now, I think all of these companies are going to be doing a lot better.
Well, here's the good news, though, Art. In the last 4 years, we've seen a huge renaissance in album sales, real wax plastic, and it's only a matter of time before Victrola comes back and some of your old Victrola stocks will start coming up.
I just got a big case of Wild Root cream oil, so just so you know. There I am.
Hey, let's shift to sports here for a moment, guys.